You're pretty quiet over there, bud. Ian didn't look up from his plate. He hadn't eaten anything yet. He didn't intend to, either. He had never been less hungry in all of his life. He muttered, "Yeah," and resumed pushing his potatoes around with his fork, painfully conscious of his father's prying gaze. Now that it was time to blow the whistle, he felt numb all over. He suspected he was probably in shock. Ian wasn't sure what that even meant, but he knew he was ready to start screaming at any second. "Well?" Ian's mom prompted. "You want to tell us what's on your mind?" Ian was suddenly struck by doubt. Was he doing the right thing? What if he didn't say anything? What would Mrs. Blackmoore do if he came strolling into the classroom tomorrow morning like nothing had happened? She'd put me in her handbag, he thought. That's what she'd do. She'd shove me into its mouth and then I'd be missing. He took a deep breath and tried his best to summarize the events of the past 2 days, struggling against tears as he stammered and sniffled his way to the end of the story. When he was done, Ian gradually became aware that an ominous silence had descended over the table. His mother was staring at him with a bubbling mixture of anger and dismay. She skinned her lips back from her teeth in a furious little grin. "Let me ask you something, Ian, okay? How old are you?" Ian gaped at her with his mouth hanging open. He hadn't seen his mom look this angry in a good long while. He'd been so consumed with terror, he didn't even consider his parents might think he was out and out fabricating the entire story. He sputtered, "Okay, I know it sounds like I made it all up or something, but I swear I'm not lying to you, Mom. Why would I do that? Please, come on." "I know you're very upset. I understand that," she said quietly. "We're all very upset. Believe me. You've been in school with Molly Rogers since kindergarten. We've talked to her parents on many occasions. What I don't know is if you fully understand the gravity of this situation. Do you?" "You're not listening," Ian shot back, and his voice broke on the last syllable. "They didn't get taken by, some weird guy or in a van or something. It was Mrs. Blackmoore. I swear it's true." His mom gritted her teeth and hissed, "Okay, I'm listening." "Run it by me one more time, okay? Go ahead." "His substitute teacher is an evil witch," Ian's dad grunted. He was staring at his son with an expression of distaste, as if he were looking at something unsavory he'd found clinging to the sole of his shoe. "She steals people and puts them in her handbag. Oh, and she cast a spell on him that made him walk into traffic. Did I leave anything out, Ian?" "A witch!" Ian's mom yelled, and she smartly rapped him on top of his skull with the handle of her butter knife. He clapped his hands over his head and opened his mouth to start hollering, but he was immediately shushed with a violent wag of her finger. "Answer my question. How old are you?" 11, Ian sniffled. His eyes were wide and wounded. He simply couldn't believe his parents thought that he was making the whole thing up. "It wouldn't matter if I was 57 years old, though, because I'm not lying to you, Mom." "You're accusing a substitute teacher of freaking witchcraft! For Christ's sake!" she snapped. "Think about that for a second, okay? What the hell is wrong with you?" "I'm not lying," Ian blubbered. "She fed them to her purse. There's more people in there, too, not just Miss Wright and Molly. I heard them screaming." His mom clenched her teeth and spat. "What is this? Are you looking for attention, or what? How do you think Molly's parents would feel if they heard you saying this ridiculous bullshit, huh?" Ian groped for something to say in his defense. Anything. And he started to cry instead. He shook his head and sobbed. "I'm not lying to you. If you don't call the police right now, she'll get me too." "Oh, enough," his mom exclaimed. She flung the butter knife down in disgust and glared at him with her lip curled into a snarl. "I have half a mind to call the school tomorrow and arrange a meeting with you, me, and the substitute teacher and the principal. How would you like that, Ian?" Ian shoved his chair back from the table and sputtered, "What? No, she'll—" "Shut up, Ian," his father growled, and he glared at his son with hands clenched on the kitchen table. "I'm shutting this down right now. If I were you, kiddo, I'd just admit that I was lying and let it go." Ian's vision was blurred with tears, hot and acidic as they rolled down his face and dripped off his chin. He'd find no help here, not at his own table. He took in a shaky breath and wheezed. I was lying. I'm sorry. It was a dumb thing to do. I'm really, really sorry. May I please be excused? His mother rolled her eyes and barked. I think it's time for you to start growing up, don't you? Yeah, sure. Ian sniffled. Can I please leave now? His mother nodded without looking at him. Ian fled the dinner table and hid away in the sanctuary of his bedroom. He pulled the curtains shut and sat on the floor with his back against the wall. It was comforting, somehow. It made him feel safe. A warm and cozy feeling that would soon be in very short supply. Telling his parents about Mrs. Blackmoore had been a mistake. Telling any adult would be a mistake. They wouldn't believe it unless they saw her in action with their very own eyes, and that would never happen. Mrs. Blackmoore would take extra care to dial down the weird when speaking with a concerned parent. She was undoubtedly very skilled in the art of fooling grown-ups into not seeing her true nature. How did she get hired for the job in the first place? Certainly not by acting like an off-kilter psycho. Maybe she just cast a spell on the person that hired her, Ian thought as he shuddered. Yet another detail he hadn't thought about. As far as he knew, the entire school staff could be under her power, including the janitor. In fact, it was possible. No one could see her for what she really was unless she wanted them to. Adults and kids alike. She might have a pleasant and unremarkable face for the rest of the world, and another one solely for those who she intended to shove, whole and screaming, into the bowels of her handbag. Because it's like when they're all really scared, Ian muttered to himself. It makes them taste better. Ian heard his cell phone vibrate from inside his daytime prison in the top drawer of his dresser. He wasn't allowed to take it to school because his mom was convinced he'd use it to cheat during a test. It was a text message from Mariana. Are you okay? I can't believe you didn't get run over today. What happened? Ian stared at the message, and he struggled to come up with an answer that she would both understand and accept. Finally, he squinted his eyes against the tears that wanted to flow and typed out, She made me do it. I couldn't stop. Immediately, Mariana texted back, Are you talking about Mrs. B? Because I would believe that. I think she's a witch. Ian let out a low, anguished groan and responded, She's the one who kidnapped Mrs. Wright. Molly, and all the rest of them too. Lots of people. She has them in her purse. I heard them screaming in there. Mariana started typing, then abruptly stopped. A few seconds later, his phone started to ring. Ian, she said carefully, I think I believe you, but I just want to make sure you're not messing with me. Are you? Because I'll kick your skinny white ass if you're just making this up to mess with me. No joke. Ian clenched his teeth and growled. I'm not. Do you think I almost got run over to prank you? Holy crap! Give me a freaking break! Mariana sputtered. Okay, I'm just saying. I mean, that lady is a freak. Of course I believe you. It's really weird, you know? None of the other teachers seem to think that there's anything weird about her. Like, I saw her talking to the principal today, and I swear he was looking at her like she's a hot movie star or something. I mean, I could practically see hearts in his eyes. It was really weird. I think she looks and sounds a lot different to other grown-ups, Ian said softly. I think she looks the way they want her to look, you know? Kids are the only ones who see her, the real her. Like, who would ever hire that lady to work at a school? Ian trailed off, grasping for the words that would best convey his troubling and ill-defined hunch about the true nature of their substitute teacher. He settled with, she's almost like a cartoon or something. I don't know how to describe it. It's like she's a villain from a Disney movie. A caricature, Mariana interjected with a soft, musing tone. Like a caricature of a witch from a fairy tale. They both lapsed into silence for a moment, both of them unsure of what to say next. Finally, Mariana let out a shaky breath and said, This is so freaking scary. I hate it. You're telling me, Ian croaked. She's gonna come after me. I broke the third rule. I told on her to my parents. But it doesn't even matter because they think that I'm lying for attention or some stupid shit. I don't know what to do. Mariana barked. Well, don't just sit there and get killed. Call the police. I mean, Don't tell them she's a witch or something like that. Tell them she tried to kill you. In a less confident tone, she added, they'll have to come check it out, right? That's their job. That's a terrible idea, Ian grunted. What am I going to say? Like, hello, police? My teacher tried to kill me, so can you please come to school tomorrow morning and shoot her or something? They'll come and talk to her, and they'll talk to my parents, and then everyone will deny everything, and I'll be screwed. I can't prove she did anything wrong. It's just my word against hers. At that instant, Ian's mom suddenly came bursting into his room, making him utter a shrill little screech of terror as she flung the door open. She jabbed a finger at his phone and demanded, "Give me that phone right now. I heard what you said, and that is not happening." Ian immediately ended the call, but he didn't hand over his phone. Like hell, he was about to do that. No way. He forced himself to return his mother's furious stare and said, "You shouldn't be eavesdropping. I deserve some privacy." She snorted in disbelief and slowly shook her head at him. "You can have all the privacy in the world when you're living out on your own. Until then, you're living in my house, under my care, and there will be no secrets. Now give me the phone." He held his phone behind his back and said, "No, what for?" "Because I said so, Ian," she hollered. And despite his best effort to stand firm, Ian flinched. For as long as he could remember, his mom's words had been the law in their house, and the reason behind every sharp command and illogical rule was because she said so. But not anymore. Ian abruptly decided, nope, not anymore. He jumped to his feet, slid open the window screen, and tossed his phone down the slope of the roof. It skittered across the shingles and landed in the gutter with a shockingly loud bang. Ian looked back at his mom, his eyes wide and afraid, and he panted, "You want my phone, Mom? Fine. Go out there and get it." Momentarily struck dumb by the wholly unexpected and monumentous act of rebellion. Finally, she gasped, "Why, you horrible little shit. Why did you do that? Do you know what you just done?" Ian smiled bitterly through a sudden gush of tears and sniffles. "You're the least of my problems right now, Mom, okay? Just go away. Just leave." His mom shook her head at him again and murmured, "You're grounded." She had a stricken expression on her face, like she'd just experienced a devastating and unforgettable betrayal. "Don't come out of your room tonight unless you have to use the bathroom. Do you understand?" "You're grounded, Ian." "Sure," Ian sighed. And he gently pushed her out of his room, another act of defiance that would have previously been unthinkable. She looked like she wanted to raise her hand to him, as she had done on so many other occasions in the past. But she didn't quite dare. Not this time. And as far as Ian was concerned, never again. "Grounded," she said in a broken whisper, and Ian closed his bedroom door on her without another word. Perhaps his dad would come up the stairs to mete out some misguided justice after she was gone, but Ian didn't think so. He was pretty sure she'd stay away from him for the rest of the night because somewhere deep down, they knew he was telling the truth. They knew, and it had frightened them. So they'd gotten angry with him instead, because it was easier to be angry than to be scared of forces beyond their control. Such was the strange and unspoken dichotomy of all parents. They were bound by the laws of adulthood to protect their children. But whenever a threat arose that made them feel powerless, well, they just got really mad at their kids instead. Ian would never understand that, not in a million years. But it was true. Later on, under the cover of darkness, he carefully crawled down the slope of the roof and fished his phone out of the gutter. It had survived the ordeal with only a few minor scratches. Ian found himself peering down at the clump of bushes below and wondered if he'd be okay if he was ever forced to jump down. The thought came out of left field, and it made him shiver a bit in the cold night air. Sure friggin' hope so, he thought. He crawled back into his bedroom, wriggling through the open window like a pajama-clad worm and lowering himself onto the floor as quietly as possible. He had a few unread messages waiting for him. One from Mariana, and it said, "Your mom's being a huge bitch. Are you okay?" He answered, "It's all good. She's gonna chill out for now. We had a talk. Anyway, I have a plan. I'm gonna play sick tomorrow and stay in bed until everyone's gone. Then I'm gonna call the school and ask for the principal. I'll tell him Mrs. Blackmoore tried to kidnap me, and I almost got hit by a car when I was trying to run away from her. I'll ask if I can come talk to him in his office, and you and Scotty come with me to back me up, please?" Mariana blasted back. What the hell, Ian? In a jumble of angry-looking all caps. No, you idiot, call the cops. As if the principal's gonna care what Scotty says. What's wrong with you? Just call the police. Ian smiled wanly at the screen and typed, The police won't take me seriously, but they'll listen to the principal. He's a grown-up. I'm just a kid. Sucks, but that's the way it is. Well, yeah, I guess, she agreed reluctantly. Message me after you talk to him, okay? He'll come to the office with you. Ian promised he'd let her know how it went as soon as possible, and they both said goodnight. He checked the second text message and slowly shook his head. It was from Scotty, who messaged, Knock, knock. It was followed almost an hour later by, The punchline was Doctor Who, get it? You say who's there, I say doctor, and then you say Doctor Who. God, you're such a dickhead for not answering. It's a good one. You wrecked it. He tucked his phone in his pocket and crept out into the dark hallway, carefully trying to avoid creaky spots on the floor as he made his way to the bathroom. He shuffled back on his tiptoes, pausing in front of his parents' door to make sure that he could hear his father quietly snoring. Satisfied that they were asleep, Ian slipped downstairs to fetch his running shoes out of his gym bag. He had a nagging and worrisome notion that it would be best if he were prepared to skedaddle on a moment's notice. Just as he was easing his bedroom door shut, Ian felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He fished it out, looking at the screen, frozen just as still as a marble statue. His face drawn back into a tragedy mask of shock and dismay. The phone number came up as unknown, and the message only had a single word. Ian read it over and over again, his brain frozen in a tight loop of brute panic. The word, of course, was Tattletale. Ian turned his phone off and shoved it beneath his pillow. He lay on his back and stared up at the ceiling, his mind racing a million directions at once. He hardly closed his eyes at all that night. You're not sick. Quit faking and get the hell out of bed. Ian's mom was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and her foot tapping in impatient rhythm. Up until yesterday, this would have been enough to send Ian scrambling to do her bidding, but it wasn't going to be like that anymore, and certainly not today. He groaned. I don't feel good. I can't go today. It was not exactly a lie. Ian felt awful. He hadn't slept more than 10 consecutive minutes throughout the entire night. Ian, I don't have time for this, she snapped. I know what you're doing, I know why you're doing it, and it ain't happening. Knock it off, get up. Ian put the blanket over his head and mumbled, No, I'm staying home. See you later. She growled. If I don't pull out of that driveway in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to be late. If you make me late, Ian, so help me Jesus, I'll... She trailed off, suddenly unsure of herself. She rubbed her palms against her eyes and said, I can't believe you, Ian. Tell me something. Who's going to watch you today, huh? Your father's already gone, and it's way too late for me to call in. For God's sake, kid, I really can't believe you. You don't have to, Ian whispered. Just go to work. Leave me alone. She groped for a response. Her mouth turned down in a grimace of sour dismay, and she finally settled with, Okay, fine. Fine by me. If you hurt yourself somehow, it's your responsibility. She glanced at the clock hanging on the wall and muttered, I have to go. We'll talk about this later. Ian pulled the curtains open to watch his mom leave, his face drawn and exhausted in the golden morning sunshine. She cast a troubled glance up at his window as she hurried down the driveway to her car. She looked vulnerable and diminished in the muted light that filtered through the gathering storm clouds. Ian discovered that he kind of felt bad for her, which was pretty funny when you consider that... Wait, what? Ian blinked up to the sky. It had been fair, bright, and blue just a few scant heartbeats ago, but now it was blanketed in a rolling wave of threatening clouds. What the hell? He looked back down at his mom and gasped. Mrs. Blackmoore was suddenly towering over Ian's mother in the driveway, gripping the smaller woman by the shoulders as she whispered into her ear. His mom listened and nodded woodenly down at her feet, her arms dangling at her sides. Her purse slid off her shoulder and fell onto the asphalt, releasing a scatter of change, old tubes of lip balm, and other purse detritus in a jingling wave. His mother didn't even seem to notice. She was lost in the spell, a puppet of the substitute's iron will. Mrs. Blackmoore took a step back, smirking to herself as Ian's mom turned and got into her car with jerky, disjointed movements. Ian threw open his window and shrieked, "No! Mom, don't go! Mom!" She stuck her arm out of her window and waved at him like a marionette. Her eyes appeared to be completely rolled back into her head, 2 white ovals glaring sightlessly from behind a slack, expressionless mask. She smiled up at his window, a mechanical twitching of her lips, as she started backing out of the driveway. Ian bellowed, "No, don't leave!" But it fell on deaf ears. 6 seconds later, her car was rolling down the street. Mrs. Blackmoore was looking up at his window. Her eyes gleamed and flickered in the murk of the gathering storm. She raised an arm high above her head, and when she dropped it to her side, a driving rain fell from the sky in a heavy curtain. Lightning licked across the racing clouds, briefly illuminating the front yard in stark relief. And Ian saw Mrs. Blackmoore was carrying her handbag. She advanced up the driveway with a brisk, confident stride, looking up at his window the entire way to the front porch. The rain curved away from her on all sides, bending against nothing in a perfect dome of dry air in the midst of the downpour. She paused in front of the steps and made a slashing motion with her hand, summoning another bolt of lightning that struck a transformer down the street with a tremendous bang and sizzling pop. The world outside his window immediately disappeared beneath a heavy veil of rain and shadow. A hot jolt of sheer panic slammed up Ian's spine, making every muscle fiber in his body stand at rigid attention. They were coming for him. Mrs. Blackmoore and her trusty handbag. And he would soon disappear. Downstairs, the front door smashed open beneath a powerful kick from a square-toed boot, and the howling wind slammed it against the wall. Ian froze and listened intently, a film of greasy sweat glistening on his forehead. He was abruptly seized with a burning need to urinate. Heavy footsteps clomped across the living room and approached the staircase. Whunk, 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 whunk. They paused at the bottom step and Mrs. Blackmoore called out, "Are you hiding under your bed, Tattletale? The bad ones always hide. Mercy, yes. You can just about set your watch to it." While his unwanted visitor taunted him from the foot of the staircase, Ian was frantically pulling on a pair of windbreaker pants over his Spider-Man pajama bottoms. As she ran, cackling up the staircase, he jammed his bare feet into his running shoes, zipped his phone into his pocket, and scrambled to the bedroom window. Rain slapped his face in a cold, stinging barrage as he slid and crab-walked his way down the slope of the roof. The drop to the bushes below seemed a heck of a lot further than it had the night before, but the alternative was infinitely worse. Mrs. Blackmoore popped her head out of his bedroom window, her eyes blazing with malignant glee, and she screeched, "People go missing, boy! People go missing all the time!" Ian flinched away from her, a scream on his lips, and the sudden movement made him slip and fall into the shrieking winds. There was a second of whirling confusion, a high-pitched shout of pure terror, and then gravity slammed him deep into the prickling depths of a boxwood shrub. Crunch! Mrs. Blackmoore rolled into the howling wind. "You get back here right now! You bad little bastard! Get back here!" Ian flopped out of the bush and lurched to his feet. He took off in a shambling run, kicking up splashes of rainwater with his heels as he fled down the street. A bolt of lightning ripped out of the clouds and struck a large elm tree across the street, pounding flash of doom that made Ian stumble in his tracks. He screamed against the ferocious gale that was trying to push him back, and kept on running. From somewhere, not far behind, Mrs. Blackmoore howled into the rain with murderous, elemental joy. The hunt was on. As much as she hated bad children who break the rules, Mrs. Blackmoore adored the hunt. "Run as fast as you can, you nasty little beast," she bellowed triumphantly. "It doesn't matter. I'll find you." Sobbing and choking for breath of the merciless downpour, Ian floundered his way to the corner. He splashed through a particularly deep puddle, and from one stride to the next, found himself slapping soggy footprints onto a perfectly dry sidewalk. He squinted against the unexpected dazzle of early morning sunshine, and his full-on sprint petered out to a confused, stumbling walk. In the space of one footstep to the next, the storm had vanished. The sun was shining, and the sidewalk was milling with people escorting their young ones to school, and Mrs. Blackmoore was nowhere to be seen. Ian suddenly felt faint. He put his hands on his knees, struggling not to vomit from a combination of terror and shock and adrenaline overload. Cold rainwater dribbled from his sagging clothes and pattered down onto the warm concrete beneath his feet. He was completely drenched, but there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. When the nausea passed, Ian stood straight up and panted to himself. Holy shit balls, that was way too close. He was answered by a quick blip from the horn of a passing vehicle. He realized that people were staring at him as they drove by, their expressions ranging from mild concern to belligerent suspicion. He realized how odd he must look, sopping wet, gaping in slack-jawed amazement at a perfectly unremarkable day. His earlier need to urinate came back with a sudden vengeance. He was about 20 seconds away from involuntarily wetting himself, an unfortunate mishap that he simply did not need right now. Gritting his teeth against the screaming in his bladder, Ian darted across the road and made a beeline for a narrow copse of trees between two houses. He scrambled into his sparse sanctuary and peed for what seemed like an eternity, leaning against a tree while his entire body trembled in relief. She actually scared the piss out of me, Ian wheezed, and he let out a peal of shrill, unbalanced laughter. Across the street, a suburban dad type in flip-flops and cargo shorts paused to stare at the shrubby patch of trees with a disapproving frown. His two young children were too involved in their conversation about the relative merits of various superheroes to note his dad was no longer moving forward, and they both crashed into his legs with terrific force. The man stumbled from his sudden impact, his face flushed red with embarrassment. He snapped an angry rebuke at his children, a finger pointed stiffly at their surprised little faces. Then he cupped his hand around his mouth and shouted, "Whoever's smoking dope in those trees, you better knock it off before I call the cops." Ian resisted a powerful urge to leap out of his hiding, give suburban dad a finger, and yell, "People go missing, didn't you know that? They go missing all the time." Instead, he hunkered down in the weeds and waited for Mr. Nosy to go away. Ian did need the police to come, hell yes, but not to hassle him for being a public nuisance. He needed them to be willing to listen. He needed to make them understand that... His phone started to vibrate in his pocket. Ian looked at the screen and uttered a low groan. It was a call from an unknown number. Ian was pretty sure he knew who was on the other end. He answered without saying anything, and an all-too-familiar voice chuckled into his ear. "Hello, brat. Oh, I'll be back for you soon, not to worry. But I have another errand to attend to in the meantime. Loose lips sink ships, as they say. Would you like to see what it is?" The call abruptly ended. And seconds later, a text message with an image attached. It was a picture of Mariana's house. Mariana was walking down the front steps, looking down at her phone, with her backpack slung over one shoulder. Ian whimpered, "Oh shit," and immediately tried to call her. There was a series of odd clicks in his ear, and then a wailing cacophony that made him cry out in surprise. He dropped his phone, and it shimmered like a heat mirage in the weeds, then bubbled and melted into a colorful paste of ooze that sank into the dirt. Ian stared at the remains in disbelief. "Mariana," he whispered. "She's coming for you." Ian hastily changed out of his wet pajama bottoms and came bursting out of his hiding spot, leaving them behind on the ground beside his melted phone. He yelled, "Mariana!" at the top of his lungs and took off running down the street. "Look out! She's coming for you!" Hey guys, it's still hot out. Like, unreasonably hot out. And you know what's great when it's unreasonably hot out? Iced tea. So if you guys like iced tea, check out Ivory Monocle Tea. That's my wife's loose leaf tea thing she does on Etsy. Etsy.com/shop/Ivory Monocle Tea. You can get a whole bunch of different kinds of teas on there. They can be made hot if you're insane, or they could be made cold if you live anywhere near the equator. So check out etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocletea, and you can get a whole bunch of different kinds of teas, from the fruity kind to the caffeinated kind to the kind that's named after creepypasta things, even one that's named after me, My Dark and Stormy Night. And if you ask, when you order that tea, you can get a little MCP dabbing sticker along with it. Oh, also, I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but I sign all the cards if they're like horror-related teas. So if you ever wanted that, check that out. That's the only place you can get it now. So yeah, check it out. Etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocletea. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. Thank you so much. A very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Stephanie Butler, Reaper61167, Bobby Karman, Tristan Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, Thiccy McQuicky, SamaHigh, CrusaderChocobo, SpookyShel, Atomaurus, Grand Moth the Milky, Big Smoke 369, Captain Scurvy, SaltyIrishPoet, Estebean, Brayden Morris, Nate Kuhl, HorrorFan1212, Hour Minute Second Time, Kyle Reznak, David Martin, Scare-ington the Unkempt, Robert Malcolm, Angelus, Spanky, Snoochie Boochie, Seclude, Lupita Galvin, That Creepy Chick, Tyler Fletcher, Merxenum, Red Shadow Cat, Xavier the Cheyenne, Demix, Sean Cadieu-baker, 6 Gay Rats in a Trenchcoat, Turtleman, Rob Like Sharp Things, Cryolinian, Xavier Graphius, Lord Life's Best, Goring Tramagasi, Maria Walker, Emily Mitchell, Crazy Kid, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Eka Limchok, Dirt Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Coffee Zombie, Hidden Tiger, Shelly J, Jeremy H, Psychomel, Nana, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Tali Sue, William King, Darth Miver, Michael Ortiz, Titanic Aries, Bardo Hawk 764, Lambda M98, Harley, Sashi Suzaku, Cronut 509, Kaylee Ambrose, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Benjamin Welvert, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiri the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. As always, thank you guys so much, because you guys help me do everything that I do here. You guys help pay authors for stories and commission stories and do everything that I can do to make this channel and make this podcast the best it could possibly be. So thank you all for supporting me here. And as always, everyone, sweet dreams.